At the instant Ilhan Omar designated Kash Patel as a brown-skinned instrument of white supremacy, she grinned with a self-assured, derisive certainty in her own righteousness. That specific smirk would turn out to be the final genuine expression her face conveyed for several hours. The circumstances that followed did not represent a discussion. Instead, they logic, methodically executing a narrative of how America's most polarizing legislator finally faced significant consequences. Intense October sun poured through the high windows of the House Intelligence Committee chamber, appearing stark and unyielding, while Washington's autumn foliage displayed red and gold externally. The internal climate grew warm due to entirely different causes. Ilhan Omar arrived appearing like a woman preparing for battle. At 43, the Minnesota 5th District representative carried herself with the aplomb of someone who had survived far greater challenges than a legislative probe. Having endured Kenyan refugee camps, Minneapolis poverty, and anonymous death threats, she regarded a mere committee meeting as performance art where she held focus. Her perfectly draped head covering, crafted of deep purple silk that caught the light, was coordinated with an expensive blazer denoting wealth and authority. Following her, a team of young progressive aides carried tablets and drafted remarks, their countenances clearly showing barely suppressed sanctimonious ire. The public gallery was filled beyond fire safety limits. Somali American community members occupied the front rows, many dressed in traditional attire, their faces revealing complex emotions of pride, concern, and anticipation. Positioned behind them were progressive activists holding their phones high, prepared to document what they had been promised would be Kash Patel's destruction. MSNBC had designated 3 camera crews, while CNN had positioned recording equipment at every feasible angle. This proceeding was not regarding oversight. It was intended as entertainment. A chant of her first name started in the rear seats and built strength like an ocean wave rolling toward the shore. Omar raised her hand to acknowledge the support, causing the room to erupt in noise while security personnel shifted uncomfortably, unsure whether intervention was required. Directly opposite her, Kash Patel remained perfectly still. The former federal prosecutor and official within the Trump administration appeared almost out of place in his sharply tailored Navy suit. At 45 years old, this son of Indian immigrants carried himself with the quiet intensity of a person who had spent years navigating the dangerous currents of national security. His steady, unblinking dark eyes tracked Omar's entry with the concentrated focus of a predator watching its target. Placed before him was a single nondescript manila folder that was closed, yet the label was readable to anyone close enough to see it: Somali Representative Omar. She failed to notice it, as she was too busy acknowledging her supporters and too confident in her meticulously planned offensive strategy. The folder rested there resembling a landmine awaiting detonation. The committee chairman, a California Democrat who looked as though he preferred to be elsewhere, struck his gavel 3 distinct times. The noise was drowned out by the surrounding noise until he shouted order into his microphone, causing feedback to squeal through the audio system. The gallery fell silent, yet the atmosphere remained charged, expectant, and aggressive. Omar settled herself in her seat at the raised committee dais, readjusted her microphone, and smiled directly at Patel. The expression did not reach her eyes, which remained cold, calculating, and assured of victory. "Mr. Patel," she began, and even those first 2 words were saturated with contempt, or perhaps I should say Trump's willing sycophant. Laughter spread among her supporters, though Patel's expression did not change. "You appear before this committee possessing quite the curriculum vitae," Omar said while shuffling papers dramatically, although a close observer would notice she was not actually reading them. "Federal prosecutor, National Security Council staff, Chief of Staff to the Defense Secretary. These are impressive titles for an individual who spent 4 years aiding a fascist president in attacking our democracy." The phrase fascist president triggered another burst of applause, which the chairman did not attempt to stop. Omar leaned forward now, becoming more invested in her performance. "However, what interests me most, Mr. Patel, is your role in spreading election falsehoods, attacking our institutions, and weaponizing the Justice Department against Trump's political rivals." She paused for dramatic impact, allowing the allegations to hang in the air like smoke. You are a brown man who served white supremacy. The words emerged as sharp as shards of glass. A child of immigrants who attempted to destroy immigrants. A puppet dancing on Trump's strings while pretending to possess principles. The assault was ad hominem, ferocious, and calculated. In Omar's experience, this was the technique for destroying political adversaries. Make the issue about race, loyalty, and identity, compel them to defend against impossible accusations, then watch them squirm. Patel did not squirm. He remained motionless with hands clasped upon the table, his expression unchanging. The only movement visible was his thumb tracing a deliberate circle on the edge of the manila folder. Omar misinterpreted his silence as weakness, and her smile widened. You and your MAGA associates attempted to overturn an election, spread conspiracy theories, and enabled an insurrection. Her volume increased with every charge, playing to the cameras, the gallery, and the television viewers she knew were watching at home. And currently you possess the audacity to sit before this committee and pretend to be some species of patriot. She slammed her hand onto the desk, a sound the microphone magnified into a thunderclap. Her supporters erupted once more, cheering, chanting, and celebrating. Patel waited, patient and unyielding. The chairman managed to restore order following 30 seconds of chaos. Omar took a drink of water, her hands steady and her confidence total. She had performed this routine previously, destroying Trump officials with rhetoric and righteous indignation. This occasion would be no different. Therefore, Mr. Patel, she said, her voice lowering to a tone almost conversational, do you possess anything to state in your defense? Any rationalization for your betrayal of everything this nation represents? 3 seconds of silence passed, then 5, as the room held its collective breath. Subsequently, Patel spoke, and his voice was so quiet that individuals in the back rows leaned forward to hear. Have you concluded, Congresswoman? The inquiry was courteous, almost gentle, using the tone a man might employ to ask if someone needed directions. Yet there was something beneath the surface, something cold, sharp, and entirely assured. Omar blinked momentarily, thrown off her cadence. What? I inquired if you were finished, Patel said, as his hands unclasped and moved toward the manila folder. With your speech, your performance, your accusations. The pause preceding the word accusations was intentional, not precisely mocking, but something worse, dismissive, as though Omar's fury was merely diverting, like a child's tantrum in a checkout line. I am not performing, Omar's voice rose, and the sudden desperation within it was jarring. I am exposing you. Are exposing, Patel interrupted, and now he actually moved, leaning forward with elbows on the table and fingers steepled while his eyes never departed from Omar's face. That is an intriguing word, Congresswoman. Let us discuss exposure. Let us discuss the truth. His hand moved to the folder and traced the label. You utilized the previous 10 minutes questioning my allegiance to America, my integrity, and my service. His voice remained conversational, but now it cut through the room like a blade. You utilized my race, my parents' immigration history, and my faith. You employed all of it as a weapon to assault me and discredit my testimony before I have offered it. He opened the folder slowly and deliberately, a movement that seemed to take an eternity. However, since you have questioned my loyalty to this country, Congresswoman Omar, I believe it is only equitable that we discuss yours. The assured smile on Omar's face did not merely fade, it fractured. Her mouth opened, closed, and opened again, but no sound emerged. In the gallery, confusion spread through the assembly like ripples from a stone cast into still water. This development was not in the script, and this was not how the day was scheduled to proceed. Patel withdrew the initial page, which displayed a photograph of Omar shaking hands with a man in traditional Somali attire. The timestamp read 2019, and the location was Mogadishu, Somalia. You are an American congresswoman, Patel stated softly, elected to represent the populace of Minnesota's 5th District, to serve American interests, and to uphold American values. He placed the photo down gently, aligning it precisely with the table's edge. Yet I must wonder, Congresswoman, and please correct me if I am mistaken, I must wonder whom you genuinely represent." He paused, allowing the implications to sink in. "Because from my perspective, looking at your record, examining your actions, and investigating your finances, it appears you have been representing everyone except the American citizens who elected you." The room erupted, with half the gallery shouting support for Omar while the other half fell suddenly silent and uncertain. Democrats on the committee shifted uneasily in their chairs while Republicans leaned forward with interest. Omar attempted to speak, but Patel raised his hand to forestall at her. "You wish to discuss loyalty, service, and integrity," he said, his voice still quiet but now carrying an edge sharp enough to cut. "Then let us have that dialogue. Let us examine your record and look at the evidence." He pulled out another document and held it aloft for viewing. "Because, Congresswoman, I have spent 6 months investigating you, every financial record, every foreign contact, every alleged crime, and every betrayal." He placed the document on the table so the header was visible to the cameras: Immigration Fraud Investigation, Ilhan Omar. "And what I discovered is going to terminate your career." Omar's hand trembled as it reached for her water glass. She missed twice before finally grasping it, but the water sloshed over the rim and pooled on her papers. She did not appear to notice the spillage. The confident warrior who had entered the room 30 minutes earlier had vanished. In her place sat a woman who had just realized the predator was not her prey, she was his. Patel's folder sat open on the table, thick with documents representing years of investigation and months of preparation. It contained evidence that could not be explained away with cries of Islamophobia, racism, or victimhood. The truth was about to emerge, and truth, as Omar was about to discover, did not care about identity politics. "Shall we commence?" Patel asked, and the inquiry was not a question at all, it was a pledge. Patel withdrew a marriage certificate from his folder. The paper was yellowed with age, but the names were clear: Ilhan Omar and Ahmed Hersi, dated 2002. "You married Ahmed Hersi in a religious ceremony," Patel began, his voice maintaining that same conversational tone that somehow rendered everything more menacing. "It was not legally binding in the United States, but it was a marriage nonetheless in your faith tradition, and you had 2 children together." He placed the certificate down and pulled out another document. "Then in 2009, you legally married Ahmed Noor Saeed Elmi, a British citizen who moved to the U.S. for education." Patel looked up at Omar. "While still in your religious marriage to Ahmed Hersi, you had 2 husbands simultaneously." "That is a debunked conspiracy theory." Omar shot to her feet, her hijab slipping slightly as she reached up to adjust it with shaking hands. "These are right-wing lies designed to—" Patel interrupted her mildly. "Is the Minneapolis Star-Tribune right-wing?" He pulled out a newspaper article with the headline visible: "Questions about Omar's marriages remain unanswered." Omar's mouth opened and closed silently. "How about the Minnesota Campaign Finance Board? Are they right-wing conspiracy theorists?" He produced another document. "Or the House Ethics Committee, which investigated these allegations?" He laid out document after document, each one a piece of a puzzle that portrayed a damning picture. "The timeline does not make sense, Congresswoman. You married Elma in 2009, yet school records show him living at the same address as you and Hersi." Patel continued. "Photos from that period show all 3 of you together, and joint tax returns were filed with Hersi while you were legally married to Elma." Patel's finger traced a timeline he had prepared. "Then in 2011, you filed joint taxes with Hersi again while still married to Elm. In 2017, you finally divorced Elm, and 1 month later you remarried Hersi legally this time." He looked up at Omar, and there was no triumph in his eyes, only cold assessment. "So let me ask you directly, Congresswoman, did you commit immigration fraud?" He paused briefly. "Did you marry Ahmed Elma to assist him in gaining permanent residency?" The final question hit with explosive force. "Were you in fact married to your own biological brother?" The gallery erupted into chaos. Security rushed forward as people surged to their feet, and the chairman's gavel banged uselessly. "That is a falsehood!" Omar screamed over the pandemonium. A racist, Islamophobic lie. Patel's quiet voice cut through the noise. Simply then, explain the evidence. He continued relentlessly. Explain the school records, the addresses, the photos, and the taxes. Explain why you will not release your immigration records, and explain why you will not allow DNA testing to prove he is not your brother. Omar's hands gripped the desk so tightly her knuckles turned white. I do not have to prove my innocence to racist conspiracy theorists, she retorted. You are correct, Patel agreed. You do not have to prove anything to me. His tone hardened slightly. But you do have to answer to the Americans who waited years to immigrate legally, the refugees who followed the rules, and the families who were separated while they navigated the system honestly. He now pulled out a photo of a Somali family outside a refugee camp, their faces thin with hunger and hope. This is the Hassan family, Somali refugees who applied for asylum in 2008 and waited in a Kenyan camp for 9 years. According to data from the U.S. State Department and international refugee organizations, the average wait time in refugee camps can often span over a decade due to rigorous vetting and limited numerical ceilings. For example, in 2017, the U.S. resettled approximately 53,716 refugees globally, a figure significant but small relative to the millions awaiting placement. He looked at her intently. 9 years, Congresswoman, while you allegedly committed immigration fraud to bring in someone who did not qualify. A commotion occurred in the gallery as a woman stood, her Somali accent thick with emotion. She wore a traditional durak with her head covered modestly, and her hands trembled as she gripped the railing. I am Somali American, she said, her voice breaking, and I came here legally. My family waited 12 years in that camp. Tears flowed freely now. My daughter died there. She was 7 years old. Security moved toward her, but Patel raised his hand, saying, Let her speak. We followed the rules. We waited. We suffered. The woman continued, pointing at Omar with a shaking hand. And you made us all look like criminals, like cheaters. Her voice rose to a wail. You made Americans think we are all frauds like you. Omar started to say, Ma'am, I never... But the woman was not finished. My son is ashamed to say he is Somali because of you. My neighbors think we are terrorists because of your words. My own community in Minneapolis whispers about you. You were supposed to be our voice, our representative, our pride. Instead, you brought us shame. She collapsed back into her seat sobbing, and the elderly man beside her, presumably her husband based on his protective posture, held her while glaring daggers at Omar. The committee room had gone completely silent, and even Omar's most loyal supporters looked shaken. This was not a Republican attack. This was her own community, her own people, turning against her. Patel gave the moment space before continuing. That is the real crime of immigration fraud, Congresswoman, not just the legal violation, though that is serious. It is the betrayal. His voice hardened slightly. You came to this country as a refugee, and America welcomed you, gave you opportunity, education, freedom, and the chance to serve in Congress. And you allegedly used that position to commit the very fraud that makes it harder for other refugees, like Mrs. Hassan's family, to come here legally. He continued his excoriation. You made Americans suspicious of immigration, you gave ammunition to those who want to close our borders, and you betrayed everyone who believes in the American dream. Omar tried to speak, but nothing came out. Her throat had gone dry, and the water glass in front of her sat empty and forgotten. But immigration fraud was just the beginning, Patel said, reaching for a new section of his folder marked Campaign Finance, Tim My Net. Omar's face, already pale beneath her hijab, went completely white. Let us talk about your boyfriend, Congresswoman, or perhaps I should say your current husband, the one whose company received over $2 million from your campaign. According to Federal Election Commission, FEC, data widely reported during that period, Representative Omar's campaign paid E Street Group, co-owned by Tim My Net, approximately $2.8 million between 2019 and 2020 for various services, including digital advertising and fundraising consulting. He pulled out FEC filings, bank records, and travel receipts. The evidence was damning, but more importantly, it was boring. They were dry financial documents that told a simple story of greed and corruption. However, Patel did not focus on the numbers, he focused on the people. Amina Sheikh, he read from a letter, an elderly Somali immigrant living in Minneapolis who receives Social Security of $783 per month. He continued reading. In 2018, she donated $50 to your campaign. She gave that money because she believed in you, because you were one of us, she wrote, and because finally someone like her was in Congress. He looked up at Omar. That $50 was part of her grocery budget for the month. She told her daughter, who wrote this letter, that she would eat less to make up the difference because supporting you was more important than eating. A sound emerged from the gallery, something between a gasp and a sob. That $50, Congresswoman, went to Tim Manette's company, the company owned by the man you were having an affair with while married to Ahmed Hersi. He continued relentlessly, the man you then divorced Hersi to marry, and whose company received millions in payments that federal investigators called irregular and potentially fraudulent. Omar tried to stand, but her legs would not support her. She remained seated, trapped as the evidence piled up around her like snow in a blizzard. You did not just commit campaign finance fraud, Patel said quietly. You stole from grandmothers, from college students, from small business owners, and from people who gave what little they had because they believed in you. Another voice called out from the gallery, this time a young woman, Pakistani or Bangladeshi by her accent, wearing a hijab and glasses. I was an unpaid intern in your office, she shouted as security moved toward her, but she kept talking. I worked 60-hour weeks for free and slept on a friend's couch because I couldn't afford rent, because I believed in your message. Her voice cracked completely. And while I was working for free, you were paying your boyfriend $2 million. While I was eating ramen for every meal, he was staying in luxury hotels. I believed in you. The young woman's composure shattered entirely. I thought you were different. I thought you actually cared about people like us, but you're just like all of them, just another corrupt politician using people's hope for your own profit. She turned and walked out, her shoulders shaking with sobs. 3 other young staffers followed her, all wearing hijabs and visibly devastated. Omar watched them go, unable to call them back and unable to defend herself because there was no defense. The evidence was overwhelming, and the betrayal was complete. Patel organized his papers, the sound of shuffling documents somehow final in the silence. Campaign finance fraud and immigration fraud are all serious crimes, but Congresswoman, we are just getting started. Because the fraud and the theft hurt individuals, but what comes next hurt entire communities and hurt America itself. He pulled out a new folder labeled with the color of warning. Let us talk about your words, Congresswoman Omar. Let us talk about September 11th. Let us talk about your anti-Semitism. Let us talk about the hatred you have normalized, the divisions you have deepened, and the wounds you have reopened. Omar closed her eyes, knowing what was coming. The words she had tried to explain away, to contextualize, to defend. The words that had followed her like ghosts. Some people did something, Patel said quietly. Those 4 words, spoken without emotion or emphasis, landed like a hammer. In the gallery, a woman stood wearing black, even though it had been 24 years. Her hands held a photograph of a man in a business suit smiling at the camera. My husband, she said simply. Tower 2, 98th floor. Some people did something, and he burned to death. Her voice did not rise. It did not need to, as the pain was carved into every word. He called me. Did you know that? He called me while the building was burning, said he loved me, said to take care of our daughter, and said goodbye. She looked at Omar with eyes that had cried all their tears long ago. And you called his murder, some people did something. Omar opened her mouth, but no excuse came. No deflection or explanation could touch that grief. Say it, the widow demanded. Say the word. Say terrorists. Say they were terrorists who murdered 3,000 Americans. Say it. According to the official 9/11 Commission report, the attacks orchestrated by the terrorist group Al-Qaeda resulted in the deaths of 2,977 victims in New York, Arlington, and Shanksville. Omar could not or would not speak. The distinction did not matter. The widow nodded slowly, as if Omar's silence confirmed everything she had known. "You dishonored my husband's memory, and you dishonored all of them." She paused. "For what political points? To appeal to extremists, or to avoid offending terrorists?" She turned and walked out, taking the photo of her husband with her, but his expression had shifted. No longer but his expression had shifted, no longer clinical and detached. Something personal had entered his eyes, anger carefully controlled but undeniably present. "You want to know what really makes me furious, Congresswoman?" His voice was still quiet, but now it carried an edge. "It is not even the fraud, it is not the theft, and it is not even the callousness toward 9/11 families." He stood now for the first time since taking his seat. "It is that you wrapped yourself in victimhood, claimed every criticism was Islamophobia, and used your identity as a shield while committing crimes that hurt your own community, making it impossible to hold you accountable without being called racist." He pulled out dozens of letters. "These are from Muslim leaders, imams, community organizers, and Muslim Americans who serve this country with honor." He held them up. "Every single one of them condemns your actions. Every single one says you do not represent them, and every single one is embarrassed by you." Omar's eyes widened. This was her final defense, claiming religious persecution, but Patel had systematically destroyed it before she could even make the argument. "You do not get to hide behind your faith anymore," Patel said. "You do not get to claim victimhood when you are the perpetrator, and you do not get to call accountability Islamophobia." He returned to his seat and organized his papers one more time. "But we are still not done, Congresswoman, because fraud hurts individuals and offensive words hurt communities, but what comes next is treason." The word hung in the air like a noose. "Let us talk about who you really serve. Let us talk about Qatar, Turkey, and Somalia. Let us talk about foreign money and foreign influence." He continued relentlessly. "Let us talk about classified information in the hands of someone who might be compromised." He pulled out yet another folder, this one black as midnight. "Let us talk about national security, Congresswoman. Let us talk about why you should not have a security clearance, why you should not have access to America's secrets, and why you are not just corrupt but dangerous." Omar slumped in her chair, her perfectly styled hijab now askew and her designer jacket rumpled from sweat and stress. The confident warrior from an hour ago was completely gone. In her place sat a woman watching her entire life collapse in real time, powerless to stop it. And the worst revelations were still to come. The black folder opened like a wound, and inside were photographs of Omar in places no American congresswoman should have been, at least not without proper disclosure, oversight. Oversight or loyalty to American interest. "Doha, Qatar, December 2019, Patel said, holding up a photo showing Omar entering a luxury hotel flanked by men in traditional Gulf dress. "You met with Qatari government officials with no other congressional representatives and no State Department officials present. Just you and Qatar's intelligence service." He placed the photo down and pulled out another. "Istanbul, Turkey, March 2021, meeting with Turkish officials while they were actively attacking our Kurdish allies in Syria." He produced another photo. "Mogadishu, Somalia, July 2022, a 3-day visit with all expenses paid by parties with ties to al-Shabaab." Each photo landed like a punch. Omar's hands trembled as she reached for water that was not there, having spilled it long ago. "You sit on the House Foreign Affairs Committee," Patel continued, his voice deadly calm. "You have access to classified briefings about U.S. operations in the Middle East and Africa, in regions where you have documented financial and personal ties." He pulled out banking records showing clear patterns, not detailed numbers. Money flowing from Qatari entities, Turkish organizations, and Somali interests. "The question is not whether you received foreign money, as the records prove you did. The question is, what did you give them in return?" Omar's voice cracked, raw from shouting and stress. "I gave them nothing," she continued desperately. "These are legitimate diplomatic contacts. Every congressperson—" Patel interrupted. "Every congressperson reports foreign contacts. Every congressperson follows protocols. and every congressperson puts American interests first. He leaned forward intensely. You vote consistently against American interests in the Middle East, against our allies, and against our security, while consistently voting in favor of countries that just happen to fund organizations that fund your campaigns. A commotion occurred in the back of the gallery as a man in military uniform stood. The ribbons on his chest told a story of valor and sacrifice, while his face told a story of grief and rage. I am Kurdish American, he said, his voice thick with an accent that spoke of two worlds and two loyalties. My family is from Rojava, and my cousins fought ISIS with American soldiers. They were our allies, and they bled with us. His hands clenched into fists. Then Turkey attacked them and killed them, and you, he pointed at Omar, you defended Turkey and you took their money. He continued, his voice breaking. My cousin Azad died in an airstrike. He was 19 years old. He trusted America and he believed we would protect him. You sold his life for campaign donations. His blood is on your hands. Security approached him gently, but he was already leaving, his shoulders bent with more than the weight of his uniform. The door closed behind him, but his accusation echoed in the silence. Patel waited until the silence was complete before speaking. That is what treason looks like, Congresswoman. Not in spy novels or movies, but in real life. He continued sternly, treason is mundane. It is voting records, undisclosed foreign contacts, and putting other nations' interests ahead of American lives. He pulled out voting records and began reading. Resolution condemning Turkey's invasion of Syria, you voted no. Sanctions against Qatar for supporting terrorism, you voted no. Funding for Kurdish allies, you voted no. Recognizing Uyghur genocide in China, you abstained. According to congressional voting records, on October 29, 2019, Representative Omar was one of only 3 House members to vote against a resolution calling for sanctions on Turkey following its invasion of northern Syria, though she later voted for a separate Turkey sanctions bill. Additionally, on January 20, 2022, she was one of only 4 members to vote against the Uyghur Forced Labor Prevention Act, citing concerns over the bill's scope and implementation. The pattern was damning in its consistency. But here is what really bothers me, Patel said, and now genuine anger crept into his voice. You claim to care about Muslims, you wear your faith publicly, and you talk about solidarity with Muslim communities worldwide. He pulled out grainy surveillance photos from China showing Uyghur detention camps. But you are silent on the Uyghur genocide, silent while China commits cultural genocide against Muslims, forces Muslim women to marry Han Chinese men, sterilizes Muslim women, destroys mosques, and burns Qurans. He looked directly at Omar and asked, why? Because China is economically important, because criticizing China might hurt you politically, or because your activism is not about helping Muslims but about attacking America and Israel. Omar tried to respond, but Patel was not finished. You claim to fight for human rights, but you are silent on Saudi Arabia's war in Yemen, silent on Iran's persecution of religious minorities, silent on Turkey's attacks on Kurdish civilians, and silent on every abuse committed by America's adversaries. He stood again, papers in hand. But when Israel defends itself, you are the loudest voice in Congress. When America conducts counterterrorism operations, you call us war criminals. And when our allies need support, you vote against them. Patel's voice dropped to barely above a whisper. So I will ask you directly, Congresswoman Omar, who do you serve? He paused. Because from where I am sitting, looking at your record, examining your votes, and investigating your finances, it does not look like you serve America. It does not even look like you serve Muslims. It looks like you serve whoever pays you, whoever gives you power, and whoever advances your career. An elderly man stood in the gallery, appearing Somali by his traditional dress and weathered face. He had been silent throughout the hearing, but now he rose with the slow dignity of someone who had earned the right to speak. I am Abdi Hassan, he said in heavily accented English. I came to America in 1992, a refugee from civil war. I lost everything in Somalia, my home, my business, my brother. His voice was steady, but his eyes glistened. America gave me a new life and a new chance. I worked 3 jobs, cleaned toilets, drove a taxi, saved money, became a citizen, and voted in every election. He looked at Omar with something worse than anger, disappointment. I voted for you in 2016, the first Somali American in Congress. I cried when you won, thought finally someone who understands, someone who will make America love Somali people. His voice cracked with emotion. But you made them hate us. You made them think we are all terrorists, all frauds, all disloyal. He continued, my grandson gets bullied in school because of you, and my neighbors ask if I support terrorism because of your words. You shamed us all. The old man's tears flowed freely now. Somalia is my birthplace, but America is my country. You were supposed to represent both. Instead, you betrayed both. He delivered his final judgment. You are not our representative. You are our shame. He sat down heavily, and the Somali section of the gallery, Omar's core supporters, her community, her people, sat in stricken silence. Some wept while others stared at Omar with expressions of betrayal. The collective rejection was palpable and devastating. Omar's hijab had slipped further, but she did not seem to notice or care. Her hands lay flat on the desk before her, trembling slightly. The fight had gone out of her, the deflections had all failed, and the shields had all been shattered. One more thing about your loyalty, Patel said, and his voice had returned to that clinical, prosecutorial tone. You send money to Somalia, lots of money, legally, mostly through remittance services supporting family, which is understandable. He pulled out financial records. But you also lobbied to remove Somalia from the travel ban, advocated for increased refugee admissions from Somalia specifically, and pushed for aid packages to the Somali government. He looked up at her. While voting against aid to Israel, our closest Middle East ally, voting against defense funding that protects American troops, and voting against border security that protects American citizens. The implication hung in the air, unspoken but clear. Where do your loyalties really lie? You were elected to represent Minnesota's 5th District, Patel said, but you seem more interested in being Somalia's ambassador, more concerned with Palestinian politics than American security, and more focused on foreign policy than fixing the district that elected you. He closed the black folder, the sound final as a coffin lid. Speaking of your district, Congresswoman, shall we discuss Minneapolis? Shall we talk about the city you abandoned while you globetrotted on donors' money? Shall we discuss what happened to your constituents while you were busy being an international celebrity? He pulled out a new folder marked simply Minneapolis. The photos inside showed a city in decline, closed businesses, crime scenes, and homeless encampments, the visual evidence of neglect and betrayal. Let us talk about the people you forgot, Patel said, the people who elected you, trusted you, and believed in you. Let us talk about what you did to them while you were collecting foreign money and attacking America. Omar looked at the photos, and something in her face finally broke completely. This was not about crimes she could deny. This was about failure she could not escape. Her own community, city, and constituents betrayed, abandoned, and forgotten. And they were in the gallery, watching and waiting to speak. The reckoning was not just coming, it was here, and it was merciless. The photos spread across the table told a story more devastating than any statistics could capture. Store windows boarded up on Lake Street, tents lining Hiawatha Avenue, and crime scene tape fluttering in front of a corner grocery. These were not abstract policy failures, they were lived tragedies. Minneapolis's 5th District, Patel began, his voice taking on a new quality, not anger, but something deeper, grief. Once one of the most vibrant, diverse, hopeful districts in America, with Somali refugees building new lives, small businesses thriving, and communities integrating and succeeding. He pulled out a photo from Omar's 2016 election night, showing her surrounded by supporters, their faces lit with joy and possibility. Hope made visible. This was your moment, Congresswoman, your chance to lift up the community that lifted you up, to serve the people who believed in you. He placed a current photo beside it showing the same intersection 9 years later, with half the businesses gone and graffiti covering roll-down gates. The contrast was brutal. This is what serving yourself instead of your constituents looks like. Omar tried to speak, but Patel raised his hand to stop her. Let me ask you something. When was the last time you held a town hall in your district? Not a fundraiser or a photo op, but an actual town hall where constituents could ask questions? Silence followed. 18 months ago, Patel answered his own question. 18 months. You have been to Qatar 3 times since then, Turkey twice, and Somalia 4 times, but your own constituents cannot get through to your office. A woman stood in the gallery, a middle-aged African-American whose face was carved with lines of hard living, wearing a grocery store uniform with a name tag reading Sharon. My son was murdered, she said, and the simple statement silenced the room. Deshaun Williams, he was 22 years old, shot outside a gas station on 38th Street. Her voice did not waver, but her hands gripped the railing, white-knuckled. You came to one city council meeting about crime, just one, and gave a speech about how defunding police would make us safer, then left before anyone could ask questions. Sharon paused. My son died 3 months later. Sharon pulled out her phone and held up a photo of a young man in a graduation gown, his smile bright with promise. He was going to college, first in our family. He was going to be an engineer. Her voice hardened, but there were no police patrols on his street anymore because of budget cuts you supported. And when the shooting started, nobody came. By the time they did, she could not finish and did not need to. I called your office 17 times. Your staff told me you were busy with important work in Washington. She delivered the final blow. My son was in the ground, and you were busy. Sharon sat down, her job done, but her testimony hung in the air like smoke. Patel pulled out call logs, pages and pages of them. These are constituent calls to your office from the last 3 years, thousands of them. Help with federal benefits, questions about immigration, concerns about crime, homelessness, and business closures. According to public reports and congressional ombudsman data, Representative Omar's office has stated it manages thousands of constituent cases annually. However, constituent service responsiveness remains a common area of political critique for many urban congressional offices facing high demand. He held up the logs. 90% went unreturned. The ones that did get responses received form letters written by interns. Because you were not interested in constituent services, you were interested in being famous, in getting on CNN, and in attacking Trump, Israel, and America. Another person stood, a young Somali man in his 20s wearing the uniform of a fast food chain. I volunteered for your campaign, he said, his accent carrying the cadence of someone who had learned English as a teenager. My whole family did. We knocked on doors, made phone calls, and believed you would help our community succeed. His face twisted with something between anger and grief. But you didn't. Crime got worse, schools got worse, jobs disappeared, and you did nothing. He continued, my uncle's grocery store was looted during the riots and he lost everything. He called your office begging for help navigating disaster relief, but you never called back. The young man's voice rose passionately. You were too busy on TV calling America racist while our businesses burned and our communities suffered. He concluded, you used us to get elected and then forgot we existed. He turned and walked out, adding one final comment. I am voting for whoever runs against you. I don't care who it is, anyone is better than you. The gallery was hemorrhaging supporters now, young people, old people, and Somali Americans who had seen Omar as their representative were abandoning her in real time. The exodus was visible, damning, and irreversible. Patel pulled out more documents, business licenses, closure notices, and bankruptcy filings. In your first term, 127 small businesses in your district closed. In your second term, 203. And in your current term, we are at 186 and counting. Federal economic data indicates that during the 2020 to 2022 period, small business closures increased nationally by approximately 25 to 30% due to pandemic-related pressures and economic shifts. with urban areas often experiencing higher rates of disruption and subsequent bankruptcy filings. He did not dwell on the numbers. Instead, he showed faces. Mohammed Hassan's phone repair shop closed. He had been there 15 years, and his kids worked weekends to help, now gone. He showed a photo of an elderly Somali woman standing in front of an empty storefront. Halima Yusuf's restaurant, traditional Somali food, a community gathering place. After the riots, her windows were smashed and her equipment stolen, and insurance didn't cover it all. He continued, "She called your office for help with disaster loans and never heard back. Closed after 40 years. Photo after photo, face after face, each one told a story of abandonment and betrayal. But it is not just businesses," Patel continued, "it is crime. The murder rate in your district is up 47% since you took office. Assault is up 63%, and property crime is up 82%. He paused. "And you know what you did about it. You called for defunding the police, called law enforcement systemically racist, and made it impossible for cops to do their jobs." He added, "And when crime exploded, you blamed everyone but yourself." A police officer stood in the gallery, identified as Minneapolis PD by his uniform. He looked exhausted, carrying the weight of a city in crisis. "I have been on the force 20 years, he said. "Worked with every community, Somali, African American, Hispanic, white. It didn't matter to me. My job was keeping people safe." His jaw clenched visibly. "Then you made us the enemy, said we were hunting black people, said we were racist killers. Morale collapsed, good cops quit, recruitment dried up. And when we are understaffed and overwhelmed, you blame us for not doing enough." He shook his head sadly. "You don't live in the district, you have security, but the people who elected you are the ones getting hurt. And you don't care? As long as you get to be on TV attacking police, you don't care." The officer walked out, and 3 other officers in the gallery followed him. Patel organized his papers, the movement deliberate, giving people time to process what they had seen and heard. "Here is what really gets me, Congresswoman," he said finally. "You came to America as a refugee, given opportunity this country gives to people willing to work hard. And you succeeded beyond most people's dreams. Congresswoman at 37, famous, powerful, and influential." He looked directly at her. "And you used that power to hurt the very communities you claim to represent. Used your platform to spread division, used your position to enrich yourself and your family, and used your identity to shield yourself from accountability." He pulled out one final photo of Omar on a luxury vacation in the Maldives, posted on her Instagram. The crystal clear water and white sand beaches contrasted sharply with the photos of Minneapolis streets. "This was taken while your district was in crisis, while businesses were closing, while crime was spiking, and while your constituents were calling your office begging for help." The juxtaposition was damning. Wealth and privilege in paradise while constituents suffered at home. "You forgot where you came from," Patel said quietly. "Or maybe you didn't forget. Maybe you just didn't care." He concluded, "Either way, the people who elected you, who believed in you, who defended you, they deserved better." An elderly Somali woman stood, helped up by her adult daughter, and spoke in Somali while her daughter translated. She says, "You were supposed to be our voice, our representative to America. You were supposed to show them that we are good people, hard workers, good neighbors, and loyal Americans." The daughter's voice cracked as she continued translating. She says, "Instead you showed them we are frauds, criminals, and disloyal." She confirmed every stereotype, every fear, and every prejudice. She continued the translation. She says, "You made it harder for every Somali refugee who comes after you." The old woman then spoke directly to Omar, her voice sharp with anger even without translation. The daughter translated the final statement. She says, "You are not Somali, you are not American, you are nothing but greed wrapped in a hijab. You bring shame to both countries, shame to Islam, shame to women, and shame to refugees." The translation complete, both women turned and left, and with them went the last of Omar's Somali supporters in the gallery. Her community had rendered its verdict, guilty of betrayal. The committee room, packed beyond capacity an hour ago, was now half empty. Democrats had fled their committee seats, leaving only the chairman and two junior members who looked like they wanted to be anywhere else. Omar's staff had abandoned her, visible through the windows as they carried boxes from her office down the hall. Omar sat alone at her desk, hijab fully askew now, makeup streaked with sweat, and her designer blazer rumpled and stained. The confident warrior was gone. The righteous crusader was finished. In their place sat a woman who had gambled everything on identity politics and weaponized victimhood and just watched it all crumble to dust. Patel gathered his folders and stacked them neatly. The investigation was complete, the evidence presented, and the verdict rendered, not by him, but by the people Omar had betrayed. "I want to be clear about something," Patel said, his voice softer now. "This is not about Democrat or Republican, this is not about Muslim or Christian, and this is not even about immigrant or native-born American." He looked at Omar one last time. "This is about a representative who betrayed her constituents, who committed crimes, who sold her vote, who forgot her duty, and who chose power and money over service and integrity." He stood and began collecting his materials. "The evidence I have presented today has been forwarded to the FBI, the FEC, the House Ethics Committee, and the Department of Justice." He continued sternly, "There will be investigations, there will be accountability, and there will be consequences." He turned to leave, then paused. "You had a chance to be a hero, Congresswoman, to lift up your community, to prove that America's promise is real and that anyone from anywhere can succeed here if they work hard and serve honorably." His voice carried genuine sadness. "Instead, you proved the cynics right. You showed that power corrupts, that identity politics is a shield for wrongdoing, and that some people use America's generosity for personal gain." He walked toward the exit, but Omar's voice stopped him. "Wait!" The word came out as a croak, barely audible. You are wrong about me." Patel turned back as Omar tried to stand, managing it on the second attempt. Her legs shook, but she remained upright through sheer force of will. "I have fought for my community, for refugees, for immigrants, for Muslims. You have fought for yourself," Patel interrupted gently. "And today, finally, you lost." The words landed with finality, and Omar swayed before collapsing back into her chair. Patel left without another word. The committee chairman banged his gavel once, the sound echoing in the nearly empty room. "This hearing is adjourned," he announced. "Congresswoman Omar, the committee will be recommending an immediate ethics investigation and potential expulsion proceedings." The formal language could not hide the reality. Omar's career was over, her legacy destroyed, her community betrayed, and her crimes exposed. As the remaining people filed out, Omar sat alone at her desk, surrounded by empty chairs, scattered papers, and the ruins of everything she had built on lies. Outside, the October sun was setting over Washington, painting the sky in shades of red and gold, beautiful and indifferent. The city would continue without her, the government would function, and other representatives would take her seat, her committees, and her power, and Ilhan Omar would be remembered not as a trailblazer or a champion, but as a cautionary tale. The New York Times, January 2026. Former Representative Ilhan Omar today announced she will not seek re-election, effectively ending her political career. The announcement comes amid multiple federal investigations into campaign finance violations, immigration fraud, and potential Foreign Agents Registration Act violations. In a brief statement, Omar maintained her innocence while acknowledging mistakes in judgment. The statement was notable for what it did not include: any apology to the constituents, communities, or individuals harmed by her actions. Minnesota's 5th District special election has drawn 6 candidates. Leading in early polls is Nadia Muhammad, a Somali-American community organizer who served as a Minneapolis City Council member. Muhammad's campaign message is simple: real service, real integrity, real change. The Omar investigation has sparked broader discussions about foreign influence in Congress, campaign finance reform, and the need for stronger oversight of members' financial dealings. The Washington Post, January 2026. Kash Patel returned to his national security consulting practice following his testimony against former Representative Omar. In a rare interview, he reflected on the hearing. This wasn't about political victory, this was about accountability. He continued, when someone uses their position to commit crimes, to betray their constituents, to serve foreign interests, party doesn't matter, identity doesn't matter, only truth matters. Asked if he felt vindicated, Patel shook his head. I feel sad, he said. Omar had every opportunity to serve honorably, but she chose differently, and a lot of people got hurt because of that choice. The Omar case has already influenced legislation. The House passed new requirements for financial disclosure, foreign contact reporting, and constituent service standards, reforms that might have caught Omar's corruption years earlier. Minneapolis Star-Tribune, January 2026. The Somali-American community in Minneapolis is working to rebuild its reputation following the Omar scandal. Community leaders have launched initiatives focused on civic engagement, integration, and demonstrating loyalty to both Somali heritage and American values. She doesn't represent us, said Abdi Hassan, the community elder whose testimony against Omar went viral. We came here legally, we work hard, we love this country, and we won't let one corrupt politician define us. The community's response has been overwhelmingly positive, with increased voter registration, volunteer efforts, and small business development. What was meant to destroy them has instead galvanized them. As Hassan put it, we are Somali, we are American, we are both, and we will prove it through service.